My aunt looked across the mahogany conference table and said the words that had haunted me my entire life. You don't deserve this. We were at my grandmother's will reading, and she was certain I'd get nothing while she and her children inherited everything. But when the lawyer opened the sealed envelope my grandmother had left, what he read made my aunt's face go white, and suddenly, 4 years of sacrifice were validated in front of everyone who called me a failure. My name is Sophie Chen, I'm 24 years old. And 4 years ago, I made a decision that my family never forgave me for. I dropped out of business school to take care of my grandmother when she was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer at 72. My grandmother Margaret had built Chun's Dynasty 5 restaurants across San Francisco from nothing. She was fierce, brilliant, everything I wanted to be. But my Aunt Helen, her only daughter, was too busy running the business empire to notice her mother was disappearing. So I moved in. I cooked her recipes, held her hand through the confusion, reminded her who she was when she forgot. And I watched my family resent me for it every single day. The resentment started small. Sophie's staying with Grandma again? My cousin James said at a family dinner 2 months after the diagnosis. Doesn't she have a life? Apparently not, my cousin Lisa laughed. Must be nice not having real responsibilities. I was there, serving tea, pretending I couldn't hear. My Aunt Helen never defended me. She just sighed. Sophie's always been different. Not ambitious like you two. Different meant I'd chosen art over business. Different meant I'd rather paint than profit. Different meant I cared more about my grandmother's last years than climbing corporate ladders. As Grandma's condition worsened, the comments got sharper. You know she's not going to remember any of this, right? James said one Thanksgiving when I mentioned I'd been teaching Grandma to paint again. You're wasting your time. It's not about her remembering. It's about her experiencing joy now. That's a pretty way of saying you have no career prospects, Lisa added. My Aunt Helen intervened, but not to defend me. Girls don't fight. Sophie's made her choices. We all have different priorities. Her tone made it clear whose priorities she respected. 6 months before Grandma died, Helen called a family meeting at the flagship restaurant. Everyone came her, James, Lisa, a few other relatives. I came straight from Grandma's house, still wearing the paint-stained clothes from our afternoon art session. Helen stood at the head of the private dining room table like a CEO addressing shareholders. I wanted to discuss Mother's care going forward. She's declining rapidly, and I think it's time to consider professional memory care facilities. I felt my stomach drop. You want to put her in a home? I want her to have professional care, yes. Sophie, you've done your best, but you're not equipped. I've been with her every day for 3 years. I know her routines, her triggers, what helps when she's confused. You're not a trained caregiver. Neither are the people at those facilities. They won't know her favorite song is Moon River. They won't know she likes her tea exactly 90 seconds after the kettle whistles. They won't know she needs to cook dumplings every Sunday because it reminds her of her mother. James leaned back in his chair. This is exactly the problem. You're too emotionally involved. You're making this about feelings instead of what's practical. Caring for someone you love isn't practical. It's necessary. Lisa shook her head. Grandma won't even remember you were there, Sophie. She barely knows who any of us are anymore. Then maybe someone should be there reminding her. The silence was heavy. Helen spoke carefully. Sophie, I appreciate what you've done. But let's be honest. You left school to do this. You have no degree, no career, no prospects. What happens when Mother passes? You'll have nothing. No resume, no future. You're sacrificing everything for someone who won't even remember the sacrifice. I'll remember. That's not enough. But I didn't move Grandma into a facility. And my family stopped pretending to appreciate what I was doing. The last year of Grandma's life, they barely visited. Helen came once a month for an hour. Spent most of it on her phone managing the restaurants. James and Lisa sent flowers on holidays but never showed up. I was there every day. All day. Cooking, cleaning, painting, reading, singing the same songs over and over because they made her smile even when she couldn't remember why. 3 months before she died, Grandma had a moment of clarity. They happened sometimes, brief windows where the fog lifted and she was herself again. Sophie, she said, gripping my hand with surprising strength. You stayed. Of course I stayed, Grandma. Helen didn't. The others didn't. But you stayed. Tears ran down her wrinkled face. I know what you gave up. I know what they say about you. But I see you, my darling girl. I see you. She died 2 weeks after her 76th birthday with me holding her hand, singing Moon River one last time.
4. O momento da verada. 4 o'clock to 5:30. The funeral was a production.
Helen organized everything: expensive flowers, catered reception, perfectly curated guest list. She gave a beautiful eulogy about her mother's legacy, her business acumen, her contribution to the community. She mentioned me once, and of course Sophie helped in her final years. Helped.
Like, I'd stopped by occasionally to check the mail.
The will reading was scheduled for the following week. Helen insisted on the fancy law offices downtown, the ones that had handled Grandma's business affairs for decades. We gathered in a conference room: Helen, James, Lisa, a few distant relatives, and me. I sat at the far end of the table in a dress I'd borrowed because I couldn't afford to buy one. My art supplies had cost more than my wardrobe. The lawyer, Mr. Chen, no relation, was probably 70, traditional, wearing an immaculate suit. He opened his briefcase methodically. Helen sat at the opposite end of the table like a queen awaiting her coronation. Let's make this quick. I have a meeting at 3. Of course, Mrs. Lin. Mr. Chen pulled out several documents. Margaret Chen's estate is substantial. The restaurants alone are valued at approximately $12 million. There are also properties, investments, and personal assets totaling another $8 million.
James and Lisa exchanged excited glances.
The primary assets, the restaurants and commercial properties, are left to Helen Lin to continue building the legacy Margaret created. Helen nodded, satisfied. As it should be. The investment portfolio, valued at approximately $3 million, is divided between James Lin and Lisa Lin. My cousins smiled. The family home in Richmond District goes to Helen Lin. Helen looked at me for the first time.
I suppose Sophie gets something small. Maybe some jewelry?
Mother always did feel sorry for her. Mr. Chen looked up from the documents. Mrs. Lin, there's more. More jewelry? More provisions.
Quite substantial ones, actually.
He pulled out a sealed envelope.
Margaret left specific instructions that this be read last, in front of everyone. He opened it carefully and began to read. To my family gathered here. I built Chen's dynasty with my hands, my recipes, and my determination. I'm proud of what I created.
But businesses are not legacies. People are. Helen shifted uncomfortably. My daughter Helen received the restaurants because she values them, understands them, and will grow them.
My grandchildren James and Lisa received investments because they're practical and financially minded.
These gifts match who they are. Mr. Chen paused, then continued.
But my granddaughter Sophie received something different, because she gave me something different. I felt everyone's eyes turn to me.
Sophie gave me 4 years, 1,460 days. She gave me her youth, her freedom, her future. She left school, abandoned career prospects, and sacrificed everything society tells young people matters, all to sit with an old woman who was slowly forgetting everything. My aunt's face was turning red. She cooked my recipes even when I couldn't remember the ingredients. She held my hand through panic attacks. She painted with me when words failed. She sang to me when I didn't know my own name. She gave me dignity in my decline, joy in my confusion, and love in my disappearance. Tears were streaming down my face now. My family said Sophie was wasting her time, that I wouldn't remember her sacrifice.
But they were wrong. I remembered enough.
Enough to know that what Sophie gave me was worth more than any business degree, any corporate career, any amount of money. Helen stood up. Mother was confused toward the end. She didn't understand. Please sit down, Mrs. Lin, Mr. Chen said firmly. I'm not finished. Helen sat, her face pale.
Therefore, to Sophie Chen, I leave the following. The private residence in Napa Valley.
Purchased 40 years ago, valued at $4 million. James's mouth fell open.
The art collection I've accumulated over 50 years, valued at approximately $2 million. Lisa gasped.
And a trust fund of $5 million, to be distributed monthly.
Allowing Sophie to pursue her art without financial worry for the rest of her life, the room was completely silent. Additionally, Sophie receives all personal items, photographs, recipes, and family heirlooms.
Because she's the only one who will treasure them, not for their value, but for their meaning. Helen found her voice. This is ridiculous. Sophie doesn't deserve. Mr. Chen held up his hand. Mrs. Lin, I'm afraid there's more you need to hear. He continued reading. I know my daughter will say Sophie doesn't deserve this inheritance.
That Sophie made bad choices, wasted opportunities, failed to build a proper career.
So I want everyone present to understand exactly what Sophie did and what the rest of you didn't do. The lawyer pulled out a second document. Over the past 4 years, I kept a journal on my good days when my mind was clear. I documented every visit, every call, every moment my family gave me. Mr. Chen opened the journal. Helen visited 47 times in 4 years. Average visit length, 43 minutes. Usually on holidays or special occasions. 32 of those visits included business discussions about the restaurants. My aunt's face was crimson now. James visited 19 times. Lisa visited 22 times. Combined, my other relatives visited a total of 63 times across 4 years. He turned the page. Sophie visited 1,460 times. Every single day. She spent an average of 14 hours per day with me. That's 20,440 hours over 4 years. The math was devastating. She bathed me when I couldn't do it myself. She cleaned me when I had accidents. She held me when I cried from the confusion and fear of losing my mind. She sacrificed dates, friendships, experiences, everything a young woman in her 20s should have, to ensure I didn't die alone and afraid. Mr. Chen looked directly at Helen. Your mother wrote this. Helen will say Sophie wasted her time. But Sophie gave me time. That's not the same thing. Helen gave me 43-minute visits between meetings. Sophie gave me her life. The silence was crushing. I'm leaving Sophie the means to build the life she postponed for me. The house so she has security. The art so she has beauty. The money so she has freedom. She earned every penny not through productivity, but through presence. And that's worth more than any business degree could ever be. Mr. Chen closed the journal and looked around the table. Margaret Chen was of sound mind when she made these provisions. I met with her multiple times over 2 years to ensure this was her true intention. She knew exactly what she was doing. He looked at Helen. She also knew you would contest it. So she included this final statement. If anyone challenges Sophie's inheritance, they forfeit their own. I won't let you punish her a second time for choosing love over ambition. Helen's hands were shaking. James and Lisa looked at their mother, waiting for her to do something. But what could she do? Contesting would cost her everything. Sophie, Mr. Chen said gently, your grandmother also left you this letter. To be read privately. He handed me a sealed envelope with Grandma's shaky handwriting. To my Sophie, who stayed. I read Grandma's letter that night, alone in my tiny apartment, soon to be replaced by a house in Napa. My darling Sophie, by now you know what I've left you. I hope it's enough not to replace what you gave up, but to give you wings for what comes next. Your aunt will say you don't deserve this. She say you manipulated an old woman with dementia. Let her say it. You and I know the truth. You deserve this because you stayed when staying was hard. You deserve this because you loved me when I wasn't lovable. You deserve this because you chose presence over practicality, and that's the rarest thing in the world. Build your life now, my girl. Paint your art. Love freely. Live fully. You've already spent 4 years in the darkness of my decline. Now step into the light of your own becoming. And know this, I may have forgotten many things in the end, but I never forgot how it felt to not be alone. That was your gift to me. My gift to you is the freedom to soar. With all my love, Grandma. 3 months later, I moved to Napa. Not to the big house. I rented that out to a family who filled it with laughter and life. I moved into the small guest house on the property, converted the barn into a studio, and started painting full-time. Helen hasn't spoken to me since the will reading. James and Lisa send occasional texts, awkward attempts at rebuilding something we never really had. But Miss Rose, Grandma's best friend, who also had dementia and lived at a memory care facility, she calls me once a week. Your grandmother told me about you, she says. She was so proud. So proud. My name is Sophie Chen. I'm 24 years old. At the will reading, my aunt said I didn't deserve my inheritance. That I'd wasted my opportunities, sacrificed my future, and gotten too emotionally involved, but the lawyer corrected her. He read my grandmother's words explaining exactly what I'd given, and why what I received in return was earned through 20,440 hours of presence, love, and dignity. My family measured value in business success and career advancement. But Grandma measured it in time spent, in showing up, in loving someone even when they can't remember why they love you back. I didn't waste 4 years. I invested them in the one person who'd always seen me for who I really was. And she invested in my future the same way, with love, intentionality, and the belief that how we spend our time defines who we are. Some people build empires. I built memories with someone who was losing hers. And in the end, that was worth everything.